Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 5th of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information around Alaska. No matter where you are, you can give us a call at 1-800-472-0391. Monitor us on social media channels, Facebook and Twitter. And of course, you can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. Click the map and you'll get your local forecast from your local weather forecast offices in Fairbanks, Juneau, or Anchorage, or the Alaska Aviation Weather Unit, as well as the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, and monitor earthquake information anytime from the National Tsunami Warning Center. You can find information on any of these places, but if you can't find what you want, you have a question about what you see, or you just like some more information, or want to send me a picture of what it looks like in your part of Alaska, I'd love to see it. david.snyder@noaa.gov. Here's a look at what's going on across southern sections of Alaska tonight. We still have a winter storm warning for the Klondike Highway at a White Pass there. Expecting conditions to improve as we go into the late evening hours, but up until about 9 o'clock or so, it looks like the potential is still there to add up to a total of about 6 to 8 inches of snow. That and some occasional gusts may make it a little tricky to drive through that region. So if you're still waiting on someone to show up, or perhaps you're expecting to leave, you might want to monitor that situation a little more closely. Again, a winter storm warning until 9 o'clock for the White Pass region. Now, as you go a little bit further west into the Thompson Pass region up above Valdez, heavy snow is possible. And I have to grin a little bit about this, and it's pretty amazing, but the winter storm warning, or the heavy snow warning, I should say, is just that. We're talking about the potential of 2 to 3 feet of snow, and as much as 4 in some cases, as much as 44 inches of snow possible, generally above 2,000 feet. The snow level will be climbing there. The problem is it's also going to come with some gusts in the region, and those gusts could bring up probably about 35 to 45 miles per hour at times. With that, it's going to be a mess. Travel through that region could be tricky, and of course that likely raises the avalanche concerns in the region, so make sure you're monitoring your avalanche information centers for that. But looking further northward still, it is going to snow across the Copper River Valley in the basin area. We're looking generally west and south of Glen Allen, which will include Eureka. The potential for snow in that region is probably going to get around the 8 to 16 inch range in general, and as much as 2 feet or 24 inches of snow in that area. So starting at 9 o'clock tonight as well until about 9 p.m. on Wednesday, a winter storm warning there. It keeps going. The winter storm warning for the eastern Alaska range is in effect there. A gust to 35 miles per hour along with that, but 8 to 16 inches of snow in general for some of our eastern Alaska range communities. And you go further north, a winter weather advisory is in effect for the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. That'll go until 6 o'clock on Thursday. 4 to 7 inches of snow there with gusts to 25 miles per hour. So it's wind, it's snow, and it's a lot of moisture and heavy snow for places like Thompson Pass, and for the White Pass area, the Copper River Basin, and eastern Alaska Range and Deltana, Tanana Flats country. Wow, what a mess. And here's the other part of this. Several other waves are working across the Gulf, as you'll see here in just a minute, that are going to reinforce that snow. So it's just going to keep coming. Across the north and west, things are settling down. Good news for the western Arctic coast communities, all the way from Wainwright down toward Point Hope, and the Kobuk and Noatak communities there, generally west of Ambler and out toward Red Dog Mine. It does look like we are going to see improving conditions through the rest of the evening. There is still an opportunity for some light snow, but it's expected that the winter weather advisories here will be allowed to expire later tonight. I showed you this yesterday, and my apologies for bringing it up twice, but you know what? It's so good. Let's look at it again. From Annie Weyowana up in Shishmaref. She took a picture of the Kotzebue Sound region, and I would assume looking out and along the coast, you can see some open water there. We'll talk about the sea ice update here, a little bit different than what we showed you yesterday when we first brought this to you, but hey, you know what, a beautiful picture. And once again, if you have a picture of your community, I'd love to see it and share it there. So thanks again to Annie. So nice, we'll see it twice. Here's a look at the satellite picture now, and watch for these reoccurring waves. We've got the broad circulation of low pressure here up above in the upper atmosphere, as you'll see in the jet stream in just a little bit, a broad trough that's pretty much moving from south to north over the Gulf right now. And you know when this happens, we're going to get just loaded with precipitation across the northern Gulf. And this is some of the wettest parts of the planet, really. You know, the northernmost rainforest, there's a reason that those exist, right? It's southerly flow like this. We get tremendous amount of precipitation when this moves through, and you can see just burst after burst of moisture moving through the Gulf of Alaska. Now, some of this is going to start sneaking its way over into northern and sections of southeast. Some of this has the potential to lean a little bit westward and move into south central Alaska, Anchorage, and the Cook Inlet region. The question is how much of that is really going to make its way down to the main road corridors there. And right now we're thinking very little at this point. So that could change, and it only takes just a small deviation in that path to get back into places like the Chugach Range and let's Turnagain Pass and Girdwood and Anchorage in the valley. So it really is very fine point of how much of that moisture is going to lean westward or lean eastward for that matter and get closer to Juneau. Right now we're thinking it's going to kind of split the difference and go right up through Yakutat, over Thompson Pass, into the eastern Alaska Range and the Deltan and Tanana Flats region. As far as Fairbanks goes, doesn't look like there's going to be a great deal of snow, maybe another inch or two out of this pattern, but right now low pressure is set up across the northern Gulf. Rain falling across central and southern parts of southeast. High pressure stacked and packed at 1,044 millibars out across western Canada. And here's our other wave of low pressure across the Bering Strait. That's keeping snow flying across the North Slope at 993 millibars. We still have a trough across the Aleutian Chain. It is just kind of a dirty area of low pressure here. Lots of low pressure centers. Chance for snow showers. It should be fairly broad from the southwest coast. Occasional snow and blowing snow there and across the North Slope. And then periods of heavier snow across some of these south central ranges and communities. With warm and wet air being channeled northward across the Gulf, you'll see this kind of pattern play out over the next couple days across the north coast. Periods of heavy rain there starting to make its way into Yakutat. Probably more than 2, maybe as much as 4 inches of rain down in Yakutat at higher terrain levels. Of course, that's going to be snow. Look for rain to poke its way into places like Sitka and northward, and then once again the White Pass and the Chilkoot Pass region will likely be looking at snowfall again. The Alaska Range will soak up most of the snow here. We'll see more clouds than heavy precipitation across the Kenai Peninsula, but once again, we're going to be watching this boundary very carefully to see how far west does that period of heavy snow move. So right now, the bulk of it looks to stay just out of the Anchorage area. A look further northward shows snow is possible across the middle Tanana Valley and the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, as well as west coast communities. At this point, we do not see any warning level snowfall generated and across the west up toward Nome. Snow showers possible there and for the central and western chain. And again, see how these areas of low pressure is kind of centered up on the Bering Sea, but as you'll see when we check out the upper air maps here with the aviation forecast, you'll notice that very broad trough of low pressure that's guiding all of this, and all these little lows are kind of dawdling out there underneath that general circulation. Over the Gulf, there's our steady southerly flow, periods of heavy rain and rain mixed with snow right along the coast, and heavy snowfall continues up across some of our interior locations as well as certainly the mountain ranges for Thursday. Let's take a look at temperatures. 30s and 40s for southeast tonight, south central, upper 20s and lower 30s, 32 in Kodiak, the middle Tanana Valley down around 12, 7 in Fort Yukon, anywhere from 5 above to 5 below for the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound temps in the teens and 20s, 21 in Nome, Unalakleet, you're looking at 17, Galena 14, about the same there in Bethel, and Bristol Bay expect lows in the lower to mid 20s, Kodiak about 31 with a high of, St. Paul 31 up to 37 by the afternoon on Wednesday. For South Central, it's going to be mild, mid to upper 30s there, 38 in Kodiak for your Wednesday, mid to upper 40s for many in Southeast. In fact, Sitka is looking at temps close to 50 degrees, mid 20s for the middle Tanana Valley, 19 for Yukon. Wainwright, you're looking at 9 degrees. Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse also in the low teens. Kaktovik 13, 27 in Nome, and once again Galena looking at 19. As we get into Thursday morning, look for temperatures in the upper 20s to about 30 degrees for South Central, near 30 in Kodiak. Mid to upper 30s for southeast. Haines and Skagway, close to 40 degrees, 43 in Sitka, about the same there for Ketchikan and Annette. Again, this is Thursday morning. As we get up toward the Anaktuvuk Pass region, 8 in the morning, 4 in Barrow. about 5 for Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Shishmaref, you're looking at 16 to start Thursday morning, 28 around Gamble and Savunga. Southwest, mid-teens, and Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, 33 with high temperatures on Thursday. Closing in on 40 degrees there, 31 for Nunavak Island. Bethel closer to 20 degrees. King Salmon and Dillingham also holding in the upper 20s and lower 30s. South Central just above freezing, mid to upper 30s there, 38 in Kodiak. Southeast, mid to upper 40s, close to 50 in Sitka, and about 9 degrees around Barrow, with many of our Beaufort Seacoast communities in the lower to mid-teens. Fort Yukon looking at a high of 21.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather now. IFR conditions will continue across parts of the Yukon Delta into Norton Sound and the Seward Peninsula. And we're going to see an increasing focus for IFR across the northern Gulf Coast and into southeastern Alaska, where we still have that very strong channel of southerly winds, both at the jet stream and then down below at 3,000 feet, and absolutely at the surface here. So watch for continued problems both in turbulence, visibility, and sealing across the northern Gulf, and some of that will be spilling over into the interior. Here we go into Wednesday afternoon, and there's that corridor right there into Prince William Sound and the Copper Valley. It looks like that will continue to be an issue for snow and turbulence as we go ahead. Notice that southeast is still kind of sneaking by on Wednesday without a whole lot of visibility restrictions so far, but many in the interior are seeing that change, with IFR conditions spreading in from the YK Delta and all the way up into the Yukon Valley and to the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, again with that steady south flow pushing moisture right up against the hills. Across the Chukchi Sea, IFR builds in there, and we'll see increasing areas of IFR at times across the central and western chain and many parts of the Bering Sea for Wednesday afternoon. Here's Thursday morning, and once again, there's that corridor of steady southerly flow right into the tallest peaks, in some cases of southern sections of Alaska. MVFR still struggling to move southward just yet around Chilkoot and White Pass. Across Sound up toward Yakutat will be the worst. And along the upper Yukon Valley, as well as parts of the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta and parts of the western Brooks Range and Chukchi Sea, looking at increasing areas of IFR. And here's Thursday afternoon, and we're still channeling a lot of that moisture into northern parts of southeast, Yakutat in particular, and areas just to the east of Prince William Sound. MVFR now, though, is fairly widespread across the interior, the Seward Peninsula, the Yukon and Kuskokwim Deltas, and across the central and eastern chain, with IFR also spreading over a large part of the coastal plain and the Arctic coast itself. Here's your pass conditions in detail now. For Wednesday, Anaktuvik Pass looking to start at MVFR but leaning over toward IFR conditions. Same goes for Adigan Pass on your Wednesday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will likely hold at MVFR conditions for most of your Wednesday. Rainy Pass will do the same. Windy Pass expected to lean over toward IFR conditions as we go. And we expect similar conditions in Isabel Pass, an eventual outcome around IFR throughout the end of the day. Mentasta Pass leaning over toward IFR conditions as we go on. A little bit kind of shows you the severity of how much of this southerly flow is making its way into the interior here just by Mentasta going over to IFR, I think. Tanita Pass looking at IFR conditions by the end of the day, and Portage Pass IFR, as you would expect, around Prince William Sound and certainly points east all the way out toward Chilkoot and White Pass, with some improvement perhaps by the end of the afternoon at MVFR. Freezing levels has the surface freezing line jogging north of the Pribilofs, but still south of most of Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. Out east, you can see the reflection of that strong southerly flow driving surface aloft freezing levels anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 feet over most of southeastern Alaska. The 10,000 foot freezing level still south of Haida Gwaii and Vancouver Island. Here's a look at the icing potential then. We are still looking at that southerly flow driving in a lot of moisture, and it is bringing up the freezing level there, or the severity for ice anyway, anywhere from to about 5,000 or 6,000 feet. And there's a potential for some considerable moderate in the region. It's hard to say it's going to be exactly right here, but if you're flying through this region tomorrow, do expect some icing, and do expect perhaps a greater threat for icing potential above what is considered normal. Across the north slope above 2,000 feet, all the way out toward the Bering Strait and north of St. Matthew and the Pribilofs, and then you get down to the Aleutians, and above 3,000 feet there's at least an isolated moderate case to be made. Southeast looking generally okay at this point. Now on to the jet stream. Take a look at this strong southerly flow south to north, 150 knots, out to the west being driven by 170 knots plus coming in pretty much from west with a little bit of a bend to a west-northwest flow, but a very pronounced trough and a very pronounced ridge across the west coast. drying things out across the west and keeping things warm and wet for many across Alaska. Here's your 9,000-foot winds. Southerlies, no question about it, anywhere from 35 knots in the central Gulf to the 75-knot range we see coming into southeastern Alaska, across the interior, south and westerlies, and then more of a brief interruption from the east across the North Slope, and then a complicated flow out across the Bering Sea right now under that long wave trough. At 3,000 feet, our southerlies are going strong across the eastern Gulf, 50 to 60 knots here. Weaker low pressure system outside of Prince William Sound. Southerlies anywhere from 10 to 15, even 30 knots across the interior. Southerlies up the west coast and westerlies in the west. Turbulence will focus across the outer coast of southeast into Prince William Sound, generally below 6,000 to 8,000 feet. Watch for isolated severe as you go through your Wednesday. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, joined again by Eric Stevens from the GINA, or Geographic Information Network of Alaska at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Thanks for joining us again, Eric.
Glad to be here.
Thanks. We are talking about satellites today, and what are satellites? And the easy way to talk about that would be to introduce our friend the globe here, which is a round spheroid type shape. We haven't been on a flat Earth as far as history is known for several hundred years now, and because of that we also know that we are orbiting around other objects in space, and that objects are orbiting around the Earth as well. We call all those things satellites in some form or fashion, right, Eric?
Right. Well, this leads to the discussion of Johannes Kepler's research 400 years ago. Did some of the early work and founded the 3 laws of planetary motion, which are important to planets and also to weather satellites.
Okay.
Kepler's first law talks about how the orbit of an object around another object is an ellipse, not necessarily a circle.
Kind of a flattened circle?
Yeah, depending on how flat
squished
it could be.
Okay.
For our purposes, we'll just say they're mostly circular.
Okay.
The second law is most important for us, though, and that is the closer an object is to the thing it's orbiting, the faster it goes. So in the solar system, the planet Mercury is the closest planet to the sun. It orbits the sun in 88 days. It moves at 100,000 kilometers an hour.
It's a lot different
just
than Earth.
moving.
Okay.
Right. And further out from the Earth is Jupiter, and it moves at only 1/4 the speed of Mercury, and it has to go further, so it takes 12 of our years for Jupiter to make one lap. The further out you are, the slower you go.
Okay.
So we're talking about planets. What does it have to do with weather satellites? Turns out Kepler's laws apply to planets orbiting the sun. They also apply to satellites orbiting the Earth.
Okay.
You know, our natural satellite is the moon. There's the famous Apollo 8 Earthrise shot.
Beautiful shot.
Oh, yeah, you could just talk about that forever. December 1968, the moon is about 250,000 miles away from the Earth.
Okay.
It takes a month to go around the Earth. It's that far out, it takes a full month to do an orbit. Another shot here of the International Space Station. Instead of being 250,000 miles out, the ISS is only 250 miles up. It's really close. And so it doesn't take a full month for the space station to go around the Earth. It only takes 90 minutes. It's so close, it just whips right around 90 minutes.
Okay.
So weather satellites, there are a number of weather satellites, and there are a number of orbits. The further out you have the satellite, the longer it takes to go around the Earth. And this is important because different satellites have different purposes. So we have a satellite here. This little salt shaker lid will serve as our satellite going around the Earth. Let's say you have a satellite that's 22,000 miles above the Earth. This is kind of a magical spot because at that distance, it takes a full day for the satellite to go around the Earth. Imagine if you put your satellite 22,000 miles up from the equator and had it go with the Earth as the Earth spun.
The same speed.
Right.
Okay.
The satellite goes around the Earth just as fast as the Earth itself is turning. In effect, the satellite will hover in one spot.
I see.
And it appears when you make a movie loop of picture after picture after picture, you can replay that and you get these movie loops. Geostationary satellites, these are called, because they're stationary in appearance, and they provide a constant frame of reference. We've got an example here. Another nice thing about these satellites, since they're that far out at 22,000 miles, you can see from pole to pole, which is nice. So they're pretty broad view and a constant frame of reference.
So those are the pictures. If you're watching a weather satellite loop on TV, your favorite weather show, that's the picture that you're going to see, is one that's sitting over the same spot.
If you're seeing a movie loop play again and again, that came from geostationary satellites. That's the only way you can do that.
Yeah.
The bummer, though, for us in Alaska is we're up on the very top of the planet, and for geostationary satellites to work, they have to be over the equator. So for the geostationary bird to view Alaska, it's kind of like reading a book, but you're reading it edge on like that.
Right.
So there's another kind of orbit called the polar orbit,
Okay.
which is nice. We're near the pole.
Yeah.
And here's a satellite. Those polar orbiters are much closer to the Earth, getting down toward International Space Station elevation, and they're not in the equatorial plane. Rather, their orbital plane is inclined like this, and the Earth turns under that satellite as the satellite orbits. The nice thing about that is for Alaska, the satellite will go right over Alaska a few times a day. And so you get a much closer image. We've got a shot from the Sumi NPP satellite. Specifically, it's a true color image from the VIRS sensor. That's an acronym there.
Okay.
But it's a beautiful shot of Alaska, and you can see so much detail. The kind of detail, because you're close in,
Very high resolution.
you couldn't get this kind of view from geostationary satellites. The advantage of these polar orbiters is nice close imagery. You can see a lot of detail. The disadvantage, though, is that the satellite flies by,
Right.
and then you have to wait a while to get the next image. And if geostationary weaknesses are that you're reading the page like that, the polar orbiter, you're reading the page straight on, but it's so close, and then it zips by, and you have to wait for the satellite to come around the Earth again. So there's no one perfect solution. Different satellites for different orbits. Each has their strength, and amazingly, it all comes back to Johannes Kepler and his laws of planetary motion. The same laws that govern how the planets orbit the sun, they govern how the satellites orbit the Earth, and even our little pretend salt shaker right here.
Right, okay. Well, since the 1957 Sputnik, we've been putting man-made objects into orbit around the Earth and starting to get pictures back. Who knows what will happen in the next 50 to 100 years. Amazing
it's
stuff.
a growing science, and the future is bright.
Thank you so much for joining us again, Eric. And for more information on Dehne and what the satellite systems do there and what Eric's been talking about today, you can go to the web address on your screen. For Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice edge. The Beaufort sea ice is actually moving into the Chukchi Sea with easterly winds moving through. The thicker concentrations of ice are moving past Barrow and into the Chukchi Sea itself, and you can see similar results there along the western coast with offshore winds helping to build ice away from the coastline. The holes that are opened up, kind of like what we saw in the picture from Annie not too long ago, some of those holes just get refrozen and more ice builds from east to west. And really the sea surface temperatures here across the Chukchi are just that close to being ready to freeze over. If the wind would stop and the waves would lower just a little bit, well, we'll probably get some flash freezing up there. Not too much longer for ice in the Chukchi. For southeasterly winds coming up the outer coast, looks like gales will continue there. Southerlies up to 40 knots in most cases with 18 to 23 foot seas, 24 foot seas as we approach Prince William Sound. And gusts on the inside will be the thing of note. Southeasterlies up to 40 knots there. Again, gusts around Stevens Passage with 5 foot seas. 25 knots from the south around the Lynn Canal. Cross Sound also looking at a gale warning tonight and into tomorrow. As we get into Thursday, southeasterlies will be occasionally strong across central and southern parts of the inner passage. Gusts to 35 knots there, slowing down a little bit in the Lynn Canal, but we'll keep those 35 to 40 knot winds going across the outer coast. Anywhere from 17 to 20 foot seas expected on Thursday in southeast. For Wednesday in south central, southeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound, 25 knots with 4 foot seas. Southeasterlies much stronger outside of Hitchinbrook Entrance, 21 to 24 foot seas there coming in from the south and east. Northerlies outside of Resurrection Bay, northwesterlies over the Barren Islands, and light northerly winds for Cook Inlet with 3 to 4 foot seas. And looks like the only ice that remains right now is fairly close to the arms. Thursday, it looks like northeasterlies will pick up a little bit more for Cook Inlet, 20 to 30 knots. You're looking at 4 to 11 foot seas there, the highest of which will be south of Kenai, anywhere from 8 to 11 foot seas. East and southeasterly flow coming through the northern Gulf, 35 knots outside of Hitchinbrook Entrance, 14 foot seas there, and easterlies continue at 25 knots with 6 foot seas in Prince William Sound. Light winds in Shelikof Strait for tomorrow, northerlies east of Kodiak Island with 10 foot seas there, south and easterlies crossing the Alaska Peninsula, 15 to 20 knots. We expect 6 to 8 foot seas on either side, 3 foot seas inside of Bristol Bay. Those pick up a little bit more as we get into Thursday. Northeasterlies coming up to 25 knots inside of Bristol Bay, easterlies down the Bering Sea coast, and east and northeasterly winds through Shelikof Strait and the north and western Gulf, anywhere from 20 to 25, looking for 12 to 13 foot seas there on Thursday. For the Aleutians, expect a light southerly flow north of Atka, 15 knots and 7-foot seas there. South and easterlies a little bit stronger from Nikolsky to Atka, 7 to 8-foot seas expected. And a north and easterly flow across the western chain, 25 to 30 knots with 8 to 9-foot seas there for Wednesday. By Thursday, a north and westerly return flow, anywhere from 10 to 12-foot seas. And north and northeasterlies coming through the central and eastern chain, 20 to 25 really, most of the region, with 6 to 7-foot seas in the Bering Sea coast and 11 to 13-foot seas there across the Pacific coast on Thursday. For Wednesday, southerlies moving up the YK Delta over Nunivak Island and through the Pribilofs, about 15 to 20 knots in most areas. You're looking at 5 to 9-foot seas, the highest seas around the Pribilofs for your Wednesday. As we get into Thursday, winds shift around a little bit more to the north and east. We have several areas of generally weak low pressure that are just kind of hovering out here in the Bering Sea. Nothing really terribly strong, but it's enough to kind of shift the wind around from day to day here. And you can see one of those circulations here just west and south of St. Matthew. An east to northeasterly flow will be moving off the Yukon Delta, 15 to 25. Look for 6 to 7-foot seas there in the ice-free regions. Now across the Arctic coast, the Beaufort Sea coast frozen up, easterlies there, 20 knots, and off the Chukchi coast in open waters, you're looking at about 5 to 6-foot seas with an easterly flow. Heavy freezing spray is still a threat there, so watch it there. And on Thursday, the winds will come up just a little bit more in some cases, and the seas pick up a little bit more to about 5 to 10 feet. Offshore, you're looking at about 3 to 5 feet near the coast, and periods of heavy freezing spray, 10 to 15 knots across the Beaufort Sea. Recapping tonight's weather, it's going to be heavy precipitation moving into the northern Gulf waters and times including parts of southeast. A winter storm warning continues for the Klondike Highway tonight there. Look for a total of 6 to 8 inches. A heavy snow warning for the Thompson Pass region begins tonight. Anywhere from 2 to 3 feet in general and as much as 4 in some cases, with winds also coming up, reducing visibility. So be careful and drive safe out there. Copper River Valley also looking for a winter storm warning as we head into tonight. Some areas there we'll be looking at 8 to 16 inches of snow with as much as 24. The eastern Alaska range under a winter storm warning through the next 24 to 36 hours, as well as the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. So prepare for a change in the weather in South Central. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. We'll see you right here again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.